So for those of you who have always wanted to make a fortune in real estate, but you just do not have the buying power or the down payment to be able to purchase a property, well, listen to this. You can actually get cash flowing properties, believe it or not, without owning a single house. And in this video, I'm going to share with you exactly how to do it. So let's get into it. So you might be wondering, well, Monica, how can I actually get into cash flowing property without owning a house? Especially since if you rent a house, in many cases, it actually costs more money per month than what you're going to be paying in a mortgage. And how is this even remotely possible to be able to maybe turn around and actually re-rent that house out? Well, I'm going to share with you something that is a new trend, but it's a trend nonetheless that the worse the economy gets, the more of a high in demand this kind of real estate becomes. And that is both shared housing and roommate housing. So if you've never heard of shared housing, the way I refer to it, is more than one person actually sharing a room. Yes, that's becoming a trend, especially with certain kinds of, I guess you could say, situations. And how do I say this lightly and delicately without offending anyone? So people that go out of post drug and alcohol rehabilitation, they usually burn a lot of their bridges when it comes to their home life. They've screwed over family and friends, and they don't have any place to go. But there's also post-incarceration, people, inmates, who have exhausted their ability to be able to stay in a halfway house, and many of them also have no place to go as well. So they are also looking for a place that's affordable. Many of them are going to be working because they can't even leave the halfway house until they actually follow all the rules and regulations, which do usually include having a full-time job before they're actually fully released. That's one of their probation or parole requirements. And so they have jobs, they have money, but they don't have a place to go. And so there's two types of housing. There's shared housing and there's roommate housing. So shared housing is going to be more than one person per bedroom. So there'll be like 2 beds in a bedroom, okay? And so you can usually charge anywhere from $400 to $600 per person per bed per month. In a situation like that, it's cash pay and it's month to month. The alternative is roommate housing, where somebody's going to rent the entire bedroom from you for one flat fee, obviously, per month, and it's just going to be them in the bedroom. So those are the two hot trends right now because it's becoming more and more unaffordable for people to be able to rent an entire house or entire unit, especially when it comes to like maybe a studio unit or something like that. It's just unaffordable, especially for people who are younger, like Generation Z. And so the other issue that you come across when you're dealing with a situation like we're experiencing in our economy where we're rapidly slipping into a recession, you're going to find that a lot of people are going to be downsizing their houses. So your argument might be, well, Gen Z is just going to live with their parents forever. Well, the reality is, when times start getting hard and the cost of living has skyrocketed as much as it has over the last couple of years, you're going to find that even their parents are going to start the process of downsizing, which means that Gen Z is not going to be able to stay with their parents forever because they're not even going to have any extra room for them anymore. So their choices are going to be roommates, go get their own house or their own apartment and, work 6 jobs, or do the shared housing option. Now, let's think in terms of where the houses are located. Let's first talk about that part because that's going to determine whether or not it's going to be like post-incarceration or post-drug and alcohol rehabilitation versus just regular roommates versus even doing student housing, which is highly, highly profitable. So student housing is probably one of my favorites because you can usually charge maximum dollars. You're going to have usually the parents who have their kids in college sharing this expense. And the parents also co-sign on these leases as well. And you're only leasing 9 months out of the year, even though you're getting the entire year for them to stay there. So they leave over the summer. They may or may not re-up their agreement, their annual agreement, depending on if they're going into their next year of college or not. But you still get a year out of them, even though they're only there for 9 months. So student housing is my favorite. However, you do have to find a house that's near a university that has at least 4 bedrooms because you want at least a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 4-bedroom, 3-bath house. If you can get more bedrooms, that's even better. And so you want to, ideally you'd buy the house, but some of you can't afford the down payment. Some of you just don't have the credit rating to be able to buy a house, in which case the alternative is that you can rent the house out. Now, here are the rules as far as rentals go. So you want to find a house that's been on the market for a long time. Ideally, it will be a house that is for sale, because there might be an option where you can do something called subject to, which essentially means you could take over their mortgage, or in the very least do a lease option or rent to own, which is kind of like you're renting, but you're taking kind of part ownership or pre-ownership of the property. And so that's also a way to get into these deals as well, to where you're essentially just kind of try before you buy with a rent to own. I love lease options and rent to own because you essentially go into a contract with them where you're locking in a certain price. You're agreeing to buy the property in, say, 3 years from now. Some of the amounts of money that you're paying every single month actually goes toward and starts stockpiling toward your down payment. And then in 3 years, you can actually qualify for a mortgage, or you can either extend it. Hopefully in your contract, you built in a 12-month extension on that, or, you know, you just basically move out and you decide that you don't want to do the deal anymore. So it essentially locks in your price, and then that way in 3 years from now, hopefully interest rates will be better. Hopefully it'll have appraised higher and have gone up in value. Likely it will, even if our economy does slip into the ditch, and it will likely appraise a little higher. And then you locked it in at that lower price. Or say the market just went to hell in a handbasket, it's 2008 all over again, and in 3 years from now that house is worth less. Then you go back to the negotiation table going, hey, sorry, but the house is worth less. So do you want to take $50,000 off so that it meets appraised value? Or do you want me to just walk away from the deal? Those are your only two options in this situation. So rent to own lease option deals are your preferred method so that you can lock in that purchase price in, say, a 36-month time frame from now. And if you can't or don't want to do either one of those, then I suggest that you just outright rent the house from them. Now, in a rental agreement, you do have to have a sublet clause, meaning that you're allowed to sublease the rooms out in a roommate situation, for example. And depending on where the house is located will determine what your exit strategy is for the property. So if it is near a university, then it will be for student housing. If it's not, or if it's in a less than desirable area, you might have to use that house for, you know, either regular roommates, or in the most, probably the most obvious is going to be post-incarceration or post-drug and alcohol rehabilitation, in which case you could fit more people in your house, but it's just more kind of a headache because you're trying to manage more people. And so you're probably thinking, well, Monica, what about neighbors around that might be complaining about, you know, 12 people being packed in a 6-bedroom house? And the answer is to that is that there are disability laws. Yes, if you are post-incarceration drug or alcohol, that's considered a disability, which means that it's illegal for people to discriminate against people who are trying to find housing or in a housing situation who are in post-recovery. And 9 times out of 10, people coming out of prison are also considered technically post-recovery as well, because most of the crimes out there that people were locked up for have something to do with drugs and alcohol. Many of them are also inside in taking drug and alcohol treatment programs. So you are protected under those laws, even if the HOA bitches about all the people that you have there, even if neighbors bitch and complain about all the people, you are still protected under the law as far as that goes. It's like the coolest thing ever. And then on top of that, you know, since these are shorter term agreements, you don't typically deal with the regular types of tenants' rights that you would in regular situations. Now, roommates are going to be different because somebody's going to be in each room. So say, for example, you have a 4-bedroom house, you're going to have 4 different people in the 4 different bedrooms. You'll be able to charge a little bit more for the master that has, you know, a bathroom attached or an ensuite. So, you know, you can decide. Now, how do you decide how much it's going to be? Well, you need to go onto those roommate kind of websites, like roomies.com, for example. Try to determine what roommates are paying for those bedrooms, for each bedroom in your area. And then that will determine how much you can make per house. So say, for example, you're able to find a rental property where you can rent out a 4-bedroom house for $3,000 a month, but because you're able to rent out each one of those bedrooms separately, you can actually rent out each one of those bedrooms for, say, $1,200 a month. So that's $4,800 a month that you'll be paying, or that's what you'll be receiving, and then you'll only be paying $3,000 a month. That's $1,200. Of course, you're going to have to pay utilities, but still, if you're able to stack up, say, 5 of those houses, and make on average about, say, $800 to $1,000 per house, that's a lot of money. That's upwards of, up to about $5,000 a month in your pocket, cash in your pocket for simply doing lease option deals or doing rental properties or a little bit of both. You might have a subject to in there, tucked in there as well. I did a different video about subject to a little bit ago. And so you can actually do these roommate or shared housing arrangements, and it's so highly profitable because in today's day and age, you're not going to be able to buy a property, buy a house, turn around and rent it out and make any money. You would be lucky to make $100 a month, and then what happens if you need a repair, or the HVAC system goes out, or the boiler goes out, or anything goes out and you need to replace it? You're going to have to be on the hook for credit card payments to pay it off with the little tiny bit of proceeds that you have squeaking in every single month, $100 a month, to be able to pay off that damage or that repair that had to be reconciled. So what you need to do is focus on how you can get bigger profits, bigger cash flows. And because the roommates and shared housing is a huge trend in today's economy, because people simply cannot afford to have their own apartment or their own house all to themselves, especially for the younger population, and their parents are having to downsize, so they don't have the option of being able to live with them and freeload off them forever. So things are starting to change, and this roommate thing is becoming a huge trend, and you can make huge profits just from this roommate strategy. Nobody else seems to be talking about this yet. I'm sure other people are going to start talking about it once they get the drift that this really is profitable, but there literally is no other way for you to buy a house and turn around and rent it out and actually make a profit unless you have a higher cash flow play. And the roommate and shared housing play is the play that you need to be looking at if you want to make high cash flows with real estate. So again, the cool thing is you can get into this business by just having a rental house. Now, I don't recommend you just run out and rent a house without knowing where you're going to get people from. Start to do research on roomies.com or other types of roommate websites to find out how much roommates are paying per bedroom. And then you want to find out if there are any houses that are available. Ideally, you'll go on Zillow.com. Yes, I know that most people go on Zillow to find for sale listings, but a lot of times those owners that have been sitting on properties for 90 days or longer, even better, 6 months or longer, and they're empty. You want to look for properties that have been empty, that have been sitting for a while. They might go for a lease option or a rent to own, or just renting out their property, especially if they're really going to like the rent to own, because at least they can lock in, them selling it. Now, they might not be ready for that. They might want to reserve the right to sell it to somebody else while you're in there, in which case they'll just rent out the property to you. Just make sure that there's a sublet clause. And then let them know that you're going to have roommates. Don't just say, I'm just going to rent it out to a bunch of people and I'm not going to live there. Just say, this is going to be a roommate situation. Don't specify whether you will be there, whether you won't be there. Don't give them too much information. Just say, I'm going to take on some roommates. And so you need to just let them know that, so then that way they have the sublet clause in your lease. And you can literally rent out a house and put people in it through those roommate types of websites and make a cash flow off of somebody else's house. It's pretty amazing. It's high in demand. And even better yet, if you can get a house that's near a university, man, you'll be golden, okay? You'll be absolutely golden. So again, you want to try to strive for that rent to own or lease option, so you lock yourself in, so they're not kicking you out after your first year. You want to make sure that you can lock yourself in. Otherwise, worst case, you just find yourself another house. So this is the hottest strategy for making cash flow with real estate. If you've always been interested in real estate, I've been in the real estate game since the mid-90s. And I'll tell you that this is the hottest and most profitable way to make money with cash flowing real estate, is with the shared housing and roommate strategy, especially doing lease options, subject to, or just simply renting the property out. Again, you're looking for 4 bedrooms, at least 2 bath, and just focus on properties that have been sitting on the market for a long time, that are empty, because remember, an empty property means somebody's got to pay taxes, insurance, utility. They're paying everything, mortgage, and it's just sitting. So they're getting more and more desperate as time goes on, and they're going to be willing to do a deal with you, even if it's not the sale of the property. Maybe it's a lease option, or maybe it's just renting it out to you so you can make the cash flow. So I hope that this was helpful to you. I have an upcoming 2-day event. It's going to be online. It's coming up this weekend. So if you want to get in on it, go to the link down below, 10xrealestate.com. Again, that's 10xrealestate.com. I'll be doing an event this weekend as well as in a few weeks if you happen to miss that one. So if you go to 10xrealestate.com, you can find out when the next one's going to be if you happen to miss this weekend. And I will talk to you all about this highly profitable cash flowing real estate opportunity and how you can get on it ASAP. All right. So give me a nice thumbs up as well as subscribe to my channel. Drop me some comments down below to let me know what you think. This is Monica Main signing off, and I will see you in the next video.